When you look at all the options for new content in the Elder Scrolls Online, the new class is probably number one if ESO wants to remain competitive in this growing MMO market. Well, I did some digging and actually found 4 big reasons why a new class could be coming as early as next year. Plus, I'm going to tell you my pick for this next class, and I've got some pretty good evidence to back it up. But let's start with reason number 1, declining player interest. Now, I'm not going to climb out on a limb here and say the sky is falling because it definitely is not. ESO's player base dips and spikes just like any other online game. It goes up when new DLCs release, and it goes down when new content runs dry. The thing is that even with new content like the High Isle chapter this year, 2 dungeon DLCs and 1 story DLC, player interest in ESO just hasn't been as strong as it's been in the past. But like I said, I don't think there's as big of a decline as some people tend to think, but it's still significant and it might just be getting worse. See, one advantage that ESO has over other MMOs is a strong core baseline of players that play the game pretty regularly. These are the players that have regular groups of friends or guilds that they adventure with, or they are the solo questers who enjoy Elder Scrolls lore, or they're the crafters or the housing mancers, writ collectors, and so on. And a big group of this core set of players are simply Elder Scrolls fans. And since there's no new test games to speak of right now, well, ESO fills that gap for some of them. It's these players, the regular dedicated fans of ESO and the Elder Scrolls franchise, that are the ones that pay the bills right now and keep ESO afloat among stronger and more competitive MMOs. These players just love ESO and will continue to play, contributing money for new chapters and ESO Plus, and being content with regular yet fairly basic upgrades to the gameplay experience, things we've had over the past few years like companions or Tales of Tribute. And the problem for ZeniMax Online is that while they have hung on to this core player base, that population is slowly but surely beginning to fade away into other more interesting games. And there's only so much housing or card collecting that one person can do. And when the Elder Scrolls 6 releases in the future, well, even more of those players will be leaving ESO for a newer version of the Elder Scrolls. This is the first reason why I think the next class is right around the corner. ZeniMax can only survive off its core player base for so long before they run out of money to maintain their game. What ESO really needs at this point is another influx of new and returning players, something big to kickstart interest again, like we saw with the Morrowind, the Elsewhere, and even the Skyrim chapter. True, all 3 of those chapters include a lot of nostalgia, but 2 out of the 3 also included new classes, which is pretty much a guaranteed hype factory and a way for them to bring in a lot more money. The next reason I think we'll see a new class sooner rather than later is simple, that's competition. We touched on this briefly earlier, but the MMO space has become increasingly competitive in the last 1 to 2 years alone. New games like Lost Ark and New World have smashed expectations at release and carved out their own fan base in the MMO genre, no doubt bleeding some players away from the Elder Scrolls Online. Even more problematic for ESO is that more established competitors like World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy XIV, and Guild Wars 2 all delivered on recent massive expansions, increasing their own populations and making it easier for ESO fans to find another game to dedicate their time to. MMOs are traditionally some of the most expensive titles to bring to market and also take extremely long to develop, but with increased player interest, we will no doubt begin to see even more MMOs arrive in 2023 and beyond, making it even harder for ESO to hold on to its players. Games like Ashes of Creation, Riot's new MMO, and even a potential second MMO by ZeniMax Online are all right around the corner, so now is definitely not the time to throttle back on content. Rather, ESO needs to re-energize its current fan base while also bringing in new players to further define a space for itself in this competitive market, and new classes are definitely one of the best ways to do that. Most of the established MMOs I mentioned did actually add new classes this year, while ESO was one of the few MMOs that did not. So 2023 is really the time to make it happen before it's too late. Reason number 3 is a big one, and that's stability. Now, I don't think there's any coincidence that ESO's content was scaled back right around 2020 when the global pandemic hit and most of the dev team was forced to work from home. This certainly added huge delays to the process of game development that we've seen the effects of industry-wide. Games are now delayed all the time, and what's really amazing is that during all of this, ESO never skipped one quarterly release. I think they only delayed one of those releases by maybe a week at the most, which is really saying a lot. And I want to make sure the developers get their props for that level of consistency during a very difficult time. But I also think they were smart about how they did things here. Releasing simpler features over the past 2 years, like Companions and Tales of Tribute, was probably the right move for them at the time to ensure they could still maintain those consistent releases as they always have in the past, which they're used to and which are proven to make them a lot of money. Basically, I think they were doing the best they could with limited resources and more difficult working conditions to come out with a consistent product. So I'm really not surprised that no big features like a new class or a new weapon skill line have been released in the last few years. The good news for us though is that things are slowly returning to normal. Developers can return to work in the office with their teams, they can benefit from increased resources and efficiency, and even bigger for ESO is Microsoft's recent acquisition of ZeniMax Media and Bethesda, meaning that if they wanted to, Microsoft could throw a ton of money at ESO and make it an even bigger player than it already is in the MMO market, and a new class would definitely be a central part of doing that. Now we're about to jump into the biggest reason of all that I think we'll be seeing a new class soon, but if you guys are enjoying this video so far, do remember to hit that like button so YouTube knows to share this video with more people, much appreciated. And if you want to support the channel further, we do have a great channel membership with some pretty amazing perks like our exclusive members only build library, with tons of unique and off-meta builds, like our newly updated Death Knight Stamina Necromancer build, which you are watching right now in the background, one of my favorite ways to play the game right now that's also extremely powerful. Huge shout out to our channel members, by the way, you all are amazing. Thank you all for making videos like this possible, and if you're not a member yet, all of our membership tiers are currently 20% off for the first month. That's a great deal if you want to jump in right now and check out all the additional content. Links to our full members-only build library are down below, or you can click on that join button for more information. But the final reason on our list is really simple. It's existing assets. What does this mean? Well, basically, it's talking about graphics, animation, and other data that are already in the game that can be effectively reused to create something new. This is important because in recent years, ZeniMax has slowly but surely added effects and NPCs to the game, which could be representative of new classes. For me, this is the biggest red flag of all for the entire list, and it's why I think we'll be getting a new class added to the game sooner rather than later. For one thing, there's actually a long history of using in-game assets with other classes which were added to ESO post-release. That includes the Warden and the Necromancer class. In both cases, there were actually NPC equivalents visible in the game long before those classes actually released. These included many similar mechanics like enemies who summoned bears and cliff racers, just like the Warden, or summoned skeletons and flesh Atronachs, just like a Necromancer. In each case, the final class which released was somewhat different from the NPCs in-game, but the core mechanics, the core ideas, and even some of the visual effects remained the same. Now since then, the ESO devs have continuously added new effects, animations, and unique NPCs to the game that could potentially be reused to create new classes. And I mean, why wouldn't you? If you've already spent the time and money to animate and create new skills and attacks, it only makes sense to reuse those on something that they can actually sell more copies of the game with, like a new class, for example. This is just a smart use of existing assets, and with that in mind, let's talk about what the next class could potentially be. Now, some of the updated animations we've seen recently center around druids, which makes sense for the 2022 chapter and DLCs, but I feel that the druid as a class is a bit too similar to what we already have in the warden class. It could happen, but I don't think it's very likely. What I think is far more likely is something that follows the pre-made classes we've seen from the other Elder Scrolls games like Elder Scrolls Oblivion. Now, if you've only played Skyrim before, you probably don't know this, but before the Elder Scrolls V, most every Elder Scrolls game had a class-based system. This included archers, barbarians, rogues, warriors, and many other options. In fact, many of the class names that we have in ESO, for example, actually come from those earlier Elder Scrolls titles, including Nightblades, Sorcerers, Templars, so it makes sense to pull from this list first when creating a new class. Now, when we look at those options, I think one class really sticks out a lot more than the rest, especially when considering other NPCs already found in ESO. That class is going to be the Monk. Monk NPCs have been appearing for several years now in-game, and if you look at all of them, there's already a decent amount of animations and effects that could be used to create a new class right now. Just look at the final boss of Black Drake Villa, for example. This NPC was added to the game almost 2 years ago and has all the moves a powerful monk class would need, including punches, kicks, a ton of special abilities like summons, ground-based effects, and even a teleport, this sort of blink, almost streak-like effect similar to what the sorcerer class has access to, which is really amazing. ZeniMax is continuing to experiment with this playstyle, it seems, as their last DLC and the Earthen Root Enclave dungeon. The final boss here, while technically a druid, has more of a brawler playstyle that includes punches and strikes and different sort of hand gestures. Even the ability names here are interesting and could possibly translate to a monk playstyle. There are some other considerations that make me think the monk class is next to arrive, other than just the visuals too. I mean, for example, recently ZeniMax changed all light and heavy attack damage scaling, and in this process they even updated unarmed attacks, which made me consider, why would they think about doing this? Well, for one thing, it would lend itself really well to unarmed attacks eventually becoming part of a monk class in ESO. ZeniMax has done something else interesting recently as well, where certain class abilities can now get buffed when using specific weapon types. We've seen this, for example, with the Warden, where now their Frost skill Winter's Revenge increases its effectiveness when the player is using a Frost Staff. This could mean that a monk class could get a similar bonus where you wouldn't be restricted against using other weapons, but you could get improved efficiency or better damage on your skills if you decided to go with unarmed weapons instead. And I know what you're thinking, wouldn't monks just automatically lose 2 gear slots? But that's not necessarily true. I mean, unarmed style gear like knuckle dusters or hand wraps could be fairly easily added to the game, I think requiring minimal graphic changes since there's no additional weapons to animate. It's just your hands, which are already there. I actually took this whole unarmed monk concept a step further and created a full monk build using the Dragon Knight class recently. So if you want to see more about what a potential monk playstyle might feel like, you can check out that video right here and let me know what you guys think about all of this in the comments section below. Will we finally get a new class in ESO next year? And if so, what will it be? As always, thanks for watching, and I will see you around in the next video.